The character of Job is always a tantalizing one. We are both drawn and put off by his story. We are both intrigued by the narrative, and it eludes clear interpretation in our minds, which is exactly what brings Job to the moment we find Job in this text today. Job has reaped a bitter harvest. We know something of that from the larger narrative. We know of heavenly debates between God and Satan. We know of Job as faithful, kind, and a good steward. We know that he has lost everything. We know that in the emotional torment of grief and trauma, Job is left questioning where God is and where justice is in all of this. And then, in the midst of this bitterness, bitterest of harvests, Job's friends appear. In fact, I think it's something of a mistake in our reading of Job that we tend to focus so much on the first couple chapters and the last chapters, in that we make Job about Job and God, and we miss the terrible and abusive interplay of Job and his community, which some textual critics believe is the point of the book of Job, that it is a criticism of contemporary Jewish theological answers to why bad things happen to good people. One wonders if you should even speak after that. After all, God says in Job, "Who is this who darkens counsel with words without knowledge?" So let us tread carefully. Job's friends enter the scene, and they find bitter, pitiable, but really hurt and grieving Job. And what do they offer him? Speak up. Platitudes. Well, God doesn't give us more than we can handle. Or, well, you must have done something to deserve this. You know, none of us are innocent. It is all a part of God's plan. His friends come alongside Job in Job's grief, and they correct Job. They tell him how he's wrong in how he's handling his grief. They grade his theological responses like a polity exam. No, oh, definitely not. Awkward phrasing here. And Job over and again screams out in a way that this verse that we read, this selection we said, is just but one example. Over and again he says, "Why are you doing this to me? I'm already hurting, and you're tearing me apart with more words." Because Job knows that when we say, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," then that's just a thing we say to put forward a false front that we are not, in fact, cut to the core by the words our friends might offer in all their well-meaningness. Let's set aside the huge tragedy of Job for a minute and look at this even just in the trivialist of examples. I have a story that I like to use to talk about this phenomenon of fixing people. I call it the splinter situation. A couple of years ago, I lamented on Facebook, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how much time I spend taking splinters out of my kids' hands and feet." And what I got was 12 well-meaning people telling me how to take splinters out of my kids' hands and feet. Now, spoiler alert, I have 4 kids, and I've learned how to take splinters out of their feet. The point to my lament was not, I don't know how to do it. It's that I get really tired of telling my kid, "If you keep moving, I'm going to stab deeper." Or the soaking and the drying off, and the soaking and the drying off. And I can tell you exactly which kid decides to live with the splinter rather than let dad and his sterilized straight pin near them. The phenomenon in its trivial is what I'm curious about. You see, we have this natural human tendency when someone tells us a problem they're struggling with to move right to telling them how they need to fix it, or what they're doing wrong that's causing the problem, or how, that's not really what your problem is. Your problem is really this, right? We, like Job's friends, pounce upon those we reportedly care about to tear at them with words when they're already frustrated, when they're already at their wits' end. Job, in his grief, has friends all running with good intentions to tell him exactly what book to read, or exactly how he's grieving wrong, or exactly what would be a better theological response. And it drives him not to a healthier place, but to an even bitter, darker, angry place. Because now he's so deeply alone in the midst of all of it. I've shared the story before, less trivial example of in my chaplaincy residency, Caroline and I were struggling at the time in a fertility journey, which you happen to know goes really well. Had you showed up then and said, "Don't worry, it all works out really well," we might have hit you. Kind of like on mile 11 of Roby Creek, when people are like, "You're almost there." And I, nonviolent I, wanted to hit them. "You're not running, don't tell me that." We were in this journey and we came to Holy Week, and I just hit the darkest of dark spots where it felt to me that God was truly dead. That the hopes and dreams I had for the future weren't coming to fruition, that the service I was giving to God wasn't earning me what I thought I should get for it. And here I was in a place, a hospital full of death, being called to death after death on my beeper, and I was truly laying in the dust of death. And in a moment in which I broke down with my other chaplain colleagues and my supervisor around me, even though we as chaplains were told again and again, it's not our job to fix anything, it's our job to sit in the situation. They tried to fix me. And they tried to point to Easter. They tried to point to what was good and what was coming. And they tried to work out their own anxiety of sitting in a place with a person who is supposed to be spiritual support to other people, saying, "Well, God is dead. What am I supposed to do with that?" And their anxiety was palpable, and it wasn't helping at all. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, except that I was tears streaming down my face, and they all left, and my supervisor was just sitting there. Her name was Robin. Robin was just sitting there. And I was staring at the carpet between us, crying. And I said, Robin, you know, the worst thing is they just taught me how to be a better chaplain by being horrible chaplains. And I don't want to learn from this. I don't want to learn from this. And you know what she said? Nothing. Naomi reaps a bitter harvest. Naomi goes to the land of Moab from as a Jewish family, a couple sons, a husband, robust family, and a future, a land of opportunity. By the by, her husbands marry nice women, strong women. All the fortunes are coming except Naomi's husband dies, and then her sons die. And then Naomi, now in a land that is not her home, with no connections and no ability to provide for her daughters-in-law, says, I have no more sons to give you. You see, the same word Job uses for my Redeemer is the same idea Naomi draws upon. In Jewish life, your Redeemer was the family member who was supposed to take care of you when you lost all your family. In the case of Naomi's daughter-in-laws, it should have been the son who would have married them so they could continue to have a future when the first son dies, except all her sons have died. So she says, I have nothing, I have no way to redeem you. I have no way to make life for you. I have no future for you. So leave me. Go back to your land and your people and fight for a future yourself. Elsewhere in the text, Naomi, whose Hebrew name means pleasantness, joy, says, name me now Mara, for I am bitter. She had a bitter harvest, Naomi. What does Ruth do to Naomi's bitter harvest? She says, merely not, well, hey, I too am hurting here. It's not just about you. That's not what she says. She doesn't correct her or fix her. She simply says, no. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Your future will be my future. Ruth sees Naomi in all her pain and ties herself to that pain and says, I will not let you bear it alone. No fixing, no correcting, no rebuking, no saying, hey, look at all the things you have that are good in your life you should feel good about. But simply the willingness to overcome her own fears and anxieties, her own bitterness and sorrow, and say, I'm with you. We will walk this journey together. Ruth volunteers herself into Naomi's story when all ties were lost. And the truly amazing power of this is when you understand what that does to the narrative as we receive it. Because Ruth and Naomi go home, and Naomi, now not alone, now empowered by the presence of I'm not in this alone, says, well, you know, actually, I do have a distant relative. His name is Boaz. Introducing Ruth to Boaz, they end up getting married. They have a child whose name is Obed, who has a child whose name is Jesse, who has a child, well, a lot of them, but the last of which is named David. Ruth, in her refusal to leave Naomi in bitterness, becomes the great-grandmother of the one we will call King David. And in ancestral line, carries on the line that would have broken if she had just done what Naomi had told her to do and left her alone in her grief. They continue the line that gets us to Jesus. It's tempting. I do it. I know you do it. I know you have it done to you. To fix people, to point out what's wrong with them, to give them the dose of perspective they need. It's holy and incarnational to enter the grief and say, you are not alone. By doing so, Ruth becomes redeemer to Naomi. By doing so, we join God at work in our lives and through our lives to the redemption of Christ to the world, reminding everyone, you are not alone. And we turn bitterness into joy, which comes in the morning. This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God.